In this video, I'll be reviewing one of your Pokemon. In this video specifically, it is Jess, who has a Psyduck that is pretty interesting. And so, in addition to it only being a single Pokemon that she has submitted in the Discord text channel called YouTube My Mon, access to this Discord, lifetime access indeed, starts at $2. Just become a YouTube member, follow the rules, and you get to keep the access for as long as you follow the rules. So, in the YouTube My Mon, Jess has posted a screenshot of her shiny Psyduck and has left a pretty decent comment here as well, which I will read up. And so Jess is saying, I always hear Golduck's trigger rate is almost unusably high unless you check the app very frequently. What are the cutoffs for how much time between checking on Golduck versus how many skill trigger up bonuses your Golduck actually functionally gets the benefits from having? What playstyle would I need for my shiny Psyduck's preference for having multiple inventory skills rather, or bank skills, than multiple skill triggers to be good? Or is Golduck's trigger rate so high that inventory is never really worth it? All great questions, and we will cover all of this in this video. A lot of you guys in the nirtheart Discord have been posting Psyduck and Golduck in the Rate My Mons in the past 2 weeks, naturally because we just had Water Week and then we had 2 weeks this weekend, and overall, Golduck is a pretty strong Pokemon. And so we will have a look at Golduck in general, and then we'll take a deep dive here and look at the actual Golduck that Jess has posted here and discuss it. So to begin with, Golduck is a skill specialist. It has a skill rate of 12.5%. The only other Pokemon I can think of that has a higher skill rate is Umbreon, and this is just stupid. Oh, this is just like a reference to the main series games where Umbreon just refuses to get knocked out. And yeah, if you had an Umbreon like worker in your company, they would make you a lot of money without even having to drink all that much coffee. So let's hop back to Golduck. 12.5% is ridiculous, okay? And the main question here that Jess is interested in having me discuss in this video is, at what point is this too much? And at what point is this simply not practical? The big difference for Golduck, I would say, that has happened in recent time is the mechanic of banked skill triggers. Prior to banked skill triggers, Golduck was more or less unusable. Also prior to Fuecoco, you could consider having a Golduck with ABB ingredient list because actually those apple drops, not bad. And so the thing to consider here with Golduck is, one thing is the skill rate, but the other thing is actually the speed. Golduck is relatively slow compared to a lot of other Pokemon, so the high skill rate here is a way to compensate for that in a way. It's a little bit funny that it's this high, but yeah. Another reason why this is so high is because Golduck is the only skill specialist with the Charge Strength S main skill. All the other Pokemon with Charge Strength S, aside from Psyduck of course, are Berry Specialists or Ingredient Specialists. Also, this main skill in general is assumed to be more valuable if it has the variable value. And yeah, it's a very strange concept that Golduck would have 12.5%. In practicality, that means 1 in 8 as a base rate. 1 in 8 productions that Golduck has will have a skill alongside it. And if Golduck is main skill level 7, which is out for Charge Strength S, then we see that the value is ranging between 1501 and 6004. Now this range actually doesn't say as much. Is it normally distributed to where it's equally likely to get 6004 as is 1501, or is there some sort of middle point that skews the statistics? So we can then compare the, actually, let's do this. We have the Raichu and Golduck, just to like have the numbers here. Because Raichu, not a skill specialist, but it has charge strength S and the fixed value. Level 7, Raichu's base rate is 3000. 3000 is not the midpoint of these two. And so the midpoint here, if it's normally distributed, would be closer to 4, maybe 4.5. And so, yeah, that is something to consider. The variable version of this sub-skill is believed to be stronger, also based on some research. Essentially, Golduck has the weakest skill in the game, arguably, but the strongest version of the weakest skill, arguably. And this skill rate is so ridiculous that the weak main skill becomes pretty strong because it happens so often. And then the overall question here is, how often does that happen? So 12.5% as a base rate is 1 in 8 productions. And the following sub-skills here are not Jess's Psyduck. That was a lot of S's. But let's just plot in, I think it is the gentle nature. Yeah, that's pretty good. Then we have skill trigger M. And we have the skill trigger S. And then maybe, just for the sake of it, we crack in some inventory. And just let this be a sleep Psyduck. So I would say this would be the hopes and dreams scenario for me personally. And the reason is you maximize that skill rate. And for a skill specialist, all things considered, it is the skill that you really, really care about. And so I would personally aim for a Golduck like this, and we should explore this. The skill rate is essentially doubled, pretty much close to it. And at this rate, you will be getting a skill trigger on average once every 4 productions. Now with the double banked, that means still it is 1 in 8 productions on average that you get 2 banked skill triggers. At that point, you also have to do a little bit of math, I guess, because level 50, the speed on this Golduck right here is around 50 minutes. The production graph, which I don't have memorized completely, I believe it is 2.2 times the base rate here if it is fully energized. So energy is 80% or higher. So that means, roughly speaking, we can expect a production from Golduck once every 25, maybe once every 23 minutes. For easy math, let's say it's 1 in 20. So it's not as bad as this, but this is the estimation. Now, if we multiply 20 minutes by 8, we get a little bit over 2.5 hours. And that's pretty good. So once every 2.5 hours, roughly speaking, you can open your game. But actually our numbers were a little bit inaccurate. So maybe once every 2.5 to 3 hours. That's not too bad, especially considering that you probably have some ingredient Pokemon in there too, and their inventory fills up real fast for some of them, especially now level 60. And so, in my opinion, a fully maxed out skill rate Golduck is the way to go. And once every 2.5 hours don't sound too bad. Now, have I double checked this math? No, but I will do so after this video, now that I've talked a little bit about these numbers, and I'll double check it and put it in a pinned comment. I overall wouldn't recommend the berry finding on the Golduck, although it depends on the way that you use the Pokemon in general. Like, that is a use case scenario. And obviously, if you find some really busted skills and it happens to have berry finding, oh well, you know? So it just depends on use. If you are using a Suicune team, then berry finding could be really strong because Golduck is a unique water type on that team. And whenever the Suicune triggers its skill, then you're going to get a lot of berries. And also, the Oran berry has a decent value to it. So if we zero out the inventory and we take out all of this, then, well, essentially, if you evolve the Golduck once, your inventory is 20. Will you run into inventory issues within those 2.5 hours? We can look at the average drop. That is some math we can do here too. Let's say your Golduck is not level 60 to do the math easy, and worst case scenario, you have apples. So this is the worst case scenario because after that double banked trigger thing update, having apples on the Golduck is not as preferable, but for the worst math possible, let's just say that it has apples. Now, on average, it's going to produce 2.5 ingredients per production. That is an ingredient production. A lot of math here, but that's what this video is all about. And you get the summarized conclusions later on. So 2.5 is the overall expected ingredient drop per ingredient production. 16% is roughly 1 in 7. And so you can then just stretch that out a little bit. And so maximally, on average, you can say an approximation is every production, you get 2 of something. It's either 1 berry, 1 cacao, or 4 apples. On average, maybe let's say you get 2. And so in those 8 productions, in those 2.5 hours, you get 2 times 8, which is 16. And you don't have any hours on this Golduck. Maybe you eventually run it overnight just because you get it to 500, get a decent chunk of inventory, and maybe even 1,000, 25. At that point, it wouldn't be a problem. Maybe you have an inventory S in here. That is definitely not a problem. So overall, Golduck is an intensive type of Pokemon to run in Pokemon Sleep. That is the case for all skill specialists. And so, with the exception of actually the legendary dogs, which is funny, particularly now with the banked skills. But that aside, Golduck as a skill specialist now has ridiculous value if you are able to really focus on those skill-related traits. And the reason why, in my opinion, you probably wouldn't want the berry finding, but at the same time, it doesn't really matter a whole lot. Let's say you have some inventory. If you do have the berry finding, I do think it makes sense to just run it overnight for a while to see if you can get as much inventory in there as possible. Our numbers were on average 2 per production. Maybe that is 3, and so you get 8 by 3. You're reasonably within that 2.5, 3 hour range still. And oh well, if you sneaky snack and get a little bit of berry finding berries, it's not a big deal. And so that's what I would say. Now, the numbers here get a little bit stranger when you stretch it out to level 60. The worst case scenario there is you have 5 plus 6 divided by 3, which is over 3. Then maybe on average, if you in addition have the berry finding, maybe you get 4 per production. So 4 by 8 is 32. Well, you have at least inventory alongside that berry finding, and you have some hours on it, maybe 1,000. You're within, so I would say roughly 2.5 hours you should check on your Golduck. And for the most part, it is going to be a daytime type Pokemon, and it does a lot of good synergy with Suicune, particularly if it does have the berry finding, now that we've gone over all the numbers. So that was a long intro, 15 minutes to try to answer the question, should Jess invest in her shiny Golduck? And I'm going to give the honest answer, and I actually haven't looked at this Golduck too much. I know it's shiny and I know the question here. So the first thing that the Golduck has, so we can mention, it has apples at level 30. That is to be expected because getting the B ingredient level 30 is more common. And then we can start with the first main skill. Now, I think we should just put this at level 30, let's say. It has inventory up M. Or actually, let's just keep to level 50 to keep the numbers consistent. And also, I see a little bit of a surprise here at level 50. It's got some inventory, so that is great. That is good for Golduck here because of the banked skill update. And so that's great. I personally like it. Now, this gets to the point where it's a little bit too much. One of the reasons why I emphasized Golduck having all those skill triggers is because you get so much more from it. Like, the nature is 20% more of the base rate in addition to the multiplicative factors into those sub-skills. Sub-skills are just an additive, but, you know, 36% of 12.5%, that's 4%. That's ridiculous. You want that. Same with the skill trigger S, which is 18%. That's a solid 2% addition. And then when you have the skill related nature as well, it's just out of control. So this, mind you, shiny Psyduck also has skill trigger M. This is where it starts getting a little bit interesting, because at that point, you don't even have to put a lot of seeds into it. You will just wand it to main skill level 4 if you evolve it from Psyduck, which, yeah, it is a Psyduck. It's got the jolly nature. The ingredient finding rate is down. This is a good thing. We don't really want those ingredients. So the fact that the ingredient rate goes from 16% to 13% is overall a good deal. And also that EXP gains up is going to help you get to level 50. Long term. This could potentially get to level 75 and level 100. And to an extent, I like to discount the level 100. It's just too far away. So I'm going to remove that. Skill trigger S2 is a ways away. And so it kind of skews our numbers here. So I think the fair assessment here is at level 50. Now, when we have gone over the inventory and we see that it has not skill trigger M, my bad. This was a big oopsie, and Jess is probably like, no, what are you doing, Nirth? It's got skill level up M. I even talked about it getting the free seeds. My bad. This is the Golduck we're talking about, the potential Golduck. So yeah, it's just the base skill rate. It's got ridiculous inventory, and it's got 2 free seeds. Now, it is a shiny Psyduck. I have to say, shiny Golduck does not look as cool, but you do get the sparkles. Should you invest in it? That's the big question. If you level this up to level 50, you will have 2 free seeds, and the value will go from, at the lowest, 542. Now looking at the table down here, the 1500, and the upper value is 2166 to 6000. It's a big jump. To get that big jump, you have to spend 3 main skill seeds. Now, the big question now becomes, are you a free-to-play player, or do you have the premium pass? Personally, in my definitions, and maybe you have some other criteria, but free-to-play, you don't have the premium pass. If you have the premium pass, you're pay-to-play. And if you stack up on bundles quite regularly, and maybe you inch closer and closer to that whale status, but that is a big consideration here, because 3 main skills on a even pretty cool, it's a shiny Psyduck, 3 main skill seeds is a big spend. And You want to get as much out of those main skill seeds as possible. And so with the update of the banked skill triggers, I do think it would have been preferable to see some more skill trigger action on this Golduck. The big strong suit here is the inventory. That really does help you out. And it has skill trigger S coming in at level 75. If we sub-skill seeded to the skill trigger M, 17% is not bad. And it is shiny. It also has helping speed. We went over this. That can also be helping speeded. It can also be sub-skill seeded. And at this point, I do think the long-term shiny Golduck could be viable, even if you spend 3 seeds. But it depends on your playstyle. And a big portion of that was the whole discussion of what is the cutoff point on that skill rate. In the case that you really like Golduck and you want to use Golduck and you don't mind spending those 3 seeds, and particularly because it is shiny, then this could be a consideration. If you base your calculations on how often you need to open the app based on the math that we went over when the skill rate is much higher, 23%, you can basically, 23 close to 24, 17 close to 16. You can divide 2.5 hours on 0.66, and then you get something like 3.5, maybe closer to 4. So this Golduck probably would like to be tapped once every 4 hours, and yeah, something like that could be the way to go. Now, yet again, depends on your play style. I personally would go for the all-in skills. Some of you will prioritize the berry finding on it because of that good Suicune combo. And yeah, we can pick up the Golduck conversation in future videos on the berry finding side of things, because I'm sure one of you guys who have been posting all your epic Golduck finds will eventually put that in the YouTube Maimon and we can talk about it again. So for you, Jess, hope this video has been helpful to make your decision on whether or not to use this shiny Psyduck, which congratulations, it's pretty cool. I have one as well, but it's nearly as good as this one. It's going to be a bag feed for now. All right, hope you enjoyed this video, Jess, and for everyone else, you can leave a like on this video. And also, a special offer right now and into the foreseeable future. I would like, oh yeah, that like was way late. I would like to piece together a video for most of you, eventually. On a couple of your Pokemon. 2 to 3 is a good estimate, so there's another reason to become a YouTube member. Join our great community. Right now, Pokemon Sleep is happening. Pokemon Unite is pretty poppin' too. Pokemon TCG Pocket will happen in a couple weeks. And the future Let's Play, Pokemon Scarlet, is happening too. So the main series games will have a little bit of more action. And, well, yeah. Scarlet and Violet, Brilliant Diamond, Let's Go still has a lot of players in there, but thanks for watching.